insanely mad, upset, frustrated.
Say hi. Say hey. Oh, say hey. Oh.
Hi everyone, happy October. I am so excited for the month of October. It feels like it was a long time coming, but it also came here really quick. I don't know about y'all, but September came and flew by. But anyway, we're not here to go and talk about September, although I do want to go and let y'all know that I am currently doing Vlogtober for the month of October. Since this is kind of my first actual full year on YouTube, I am going to be doing it a little bit different. So instead of a video every day, I'm going to be doing a week-long amount of videos that will go live every single Monday. And then Wednesdays, I will be doing my usual bookish content. Anyway, that's enough of that. We are here to do the September reading wrap-up, and I will go and let you know some of the details. So, pulling out my handy-dandy story graph, I read a total of 8 books, and one of them was a DNF. I didn't do as well as I'd hoped, mostly because towards the end of the month I felt like I didn't get as much reading done as I normally would. So it was kind of like a roller coaster, I guess you could say. So I got a total amount of 2,989 pages read, which is still pretty good. I mean, you know, even though I'm not happy with how many books I read, mostly because towards the end I didn't do any reading, it was still really great. Average ratings, I had 3.63 stars. I kind of had an interesting reading month. I didn't have a single 5-star rated book, but you know, I still did good. I still did good. Some of the books came close that I read, and they were close to being 5 stars, but they weren't exactly 5-star reads. They were close, I guess you could say. So we're gonna start from the bottom going upwards to the top. The way I go and rate my books is basically how they make me feel. So a 5-star book for me is basically a book that I know I will want to read again. It's one that I can't stop thinking about, and I will reflect on, you know, months from now, years from now, etc. It usually makes me feel some sort of emotion. And then I don't normally rate books lower than 3 stars. I still am getting back into reading, but if they're good but they aren't ones that really elicit this intense emotion out of me, then they're usually around a 3.5. And then DNFs, sometimes I will rate them and sometimes I won't. It kind of depends on how much of the book I complete. I know I've never really explained that before when I've done these videos, so I felt like it would probably be good to do so now. Anyway, let's start with the most disappointing book that I tried to read for the month of September. And that book would be Long Live Evil by Sarah Rees Brennan. I am so mad about this book. I am so insanely mad, upset, frustrated with this book. So for those of you that don't know, I had this book as a buddy read with my friend Kat, aka Curious Cat. I'll also link her information down below. And this was our buddy read for this month. It was one that I was so excited about. It was one of those anticipated releases for me because it has morally gray characters, and it's where villains are kind of the lead characters that you're following along with the story. Like, if you ever rooted for a villain, this was said to be the book for you. So I was like, yes, I am so ready for this. Sign me up. I'm excited. And unfortunately, it really fell through. Right away, you're put into the story. So the main character, she is sick. She has cancer and she's only going to have so long to live, and her sister are obsessed with this book series. Her sister more than her. She kind of tends to enjoy the villains in the story a little bit more and root for them, and suddenly she's kind of struck up with this deal where she can go into the story, and if she's able to find this item for this character, then she will no longer be sick in the real world. And she's like, you know what? Great, I want to keep living. So she's transported into the book, and she finds out that she is in the body of one of the known villains that is actually going to be executed. And so she's like, oh crap, how am I going to find this item if I die. So she automatically goes and constructs this plan and how she's going to work with other villains in the story to help achieve this main goal. Sounds really great. Also, Nugget decided she's going to be eating right now, so if you hear some crunches, that is why. She tends to eat when we're close to her bowl, or if if I'm here and her dad is here. So yeah, she just likes company when she eats. I completely understand. But anyway, going back to the book. So the whole premise of it sounded so interesting. It sounded like something that was right up my alley. I couldn't wait to start it, and I was just anticipating the beginning of September. Started reading it, and immediately I was disappointed. And at first I'm like, okay, you know, sometimes you have to get to page 100 and then you're going to realize, like, okay, it just took a while to build things up. It was just a me thing. The story's actually really great now. But things still felt weird, and Kat and I were DMing back and forth, and we're like, it's really hard to get into the story. Like, is it the writing? Like, what exactly is this? And she ended up going and deciding she was going to stop sooner than I was. I was like, I'm going to take a little break, and then towards the end of the month try to see if I can go any further in the further in the book before I decide what I'm going to do. And so I did just that, and it was a DNF for me. So this book, basically the writing style was just so weird. Like, it kind of felt like they were trying to include modern slang into the story, and every time they put that in there, it just kind of pulled me out of the story, and it made it really difficult to kind of stay entranced by this world that was getting created in front of you. And I don't know, I just wasn't in the mindset where I really wanted something that had comedy in it. I can't focus. We're gonna wait until Nugget is done eating. Nuggie is done eating so I can continue talking about this book. So basically my issue with this was I wasn't really of the mindset that this was gonna be a comedy. There was a lot more like comedic moments, and in some ways it just kind of seemed more like a melodrama for me. That was the best way I could go and explain it. And then when I did some more reading, after I came back from my trip to South Dakota, I was like, okay, now I realize what this book is making me think of. I don't know if you're familiar with the movies like Blazing Saddles, Spaceballs, Robin Hood Men in Tights, those kind of movies. But those were some of the movies that we actually watched while we were over at my parents' house. And they're funny, but you know some of the cringiness that's in there. And then, of course, some of the certain remarks that aren't really okay in this day and time, but back then were some of the more comedic things that they happen to use in movies. But anyway, just giving you a better example, that's kind of what this reminded me of, except excluding those like racist remarks or anything like that. The comedy, the randomness, those types of things, that's what this book had that did not work for me and would constantly pull me out of the book. So a few quotes I actually have marked in here, and I'm gonna read them to you. So one of them says, Raella dropped a kiss on the Viper's head. I'm calling you Victoria Broccoli. Like, what? What? This is the character that goes into, like, this is the main character that we're following along with that is sick and then gets put into the body of a villain. And I'm just like, I can't take you seriously with comments like this. And then the other one, which was about like 70 pages or so in, the first one was 30 pages into the book. So then this next one, it says, I am Lady Raella Domitia, and I am burdened with glorious prophecy, also a glorious bosom, but that's not relevant. Like, it's so random. And so, unfortunately, quotes like that, moments like that in this book were some of the many reasons why I couldn't continue reading. Now, some of the other characters in the book, they did seem interesting. I was very intrigued, especially by her housemaid. But I couldn't get myself to read through some of these comments, and constantly get pulled out of the world building, because suddenly there would be a flow and I'm like, okay, maybe I might be able to read a little bit more, and then main character would make a comment like this and I'm like, okay, no, I don't think I can. I don't think my brain can handle these things. So unfortunately, this book was a DNF for me. I kind of looked around on Goodreads and Storygraphs to see if there were similar ratings or feelings like what I was kind of going through while reading this book. And there were some people that obviously felt that way, but then there were a lot of other people that really rated it highly. And they said, like, you know, it was a struggle at first. They felt like they were going to DNF it, but then the end really got to them. So I am curious, you know, like, this is a very similar feeling to what I had with The Troop, but The Troop was actually really good. It just grossed me out and made me sick to my stomach. Whereas this one, it's so hard to read, but just knowing that stuff, like, my stubbornness makes me want to continue reading it, and I don't think I can. So yeah, that is my rant on this book. Unfortunately, it did not work for me. Maybe it will work for you, especially if you are in the mood for something a little bit more silly and goofy and has some of that comedy in the book that you just want to read. But if you want something more serious and, I guess for lack of better words, bloodthirsty, especially if you're thinking like, I'm gonna follow around these villains, then this is probably not the book for you, because the comedy might pull you out of the world and the story just like it did for me. All right, that's all I'm gonna say about this book. We're putting it down. No more about this book. All right, next one. I ended up going and picking up Malorie, which is the second book in the Bird Box series, and it's by Josh Malerman. This one I listened to on Audible. I think if you've listened to one of my past wrap-ups, my fiance and I did listen to it during a road trip, and I was like, I really want to see how the story continues. I was very curious, and it pretty much was the same for me. I still rated it around a 3-star. It was still really difficult to get through. Malorie, the main character, was so increasingly frustrating, and just her dialogue was so painful to get through. But I did finish it, and the ending was very interesting. I did not see it coming, because in the story you do get to follow Malorie and the 2 kids on from the last story and where you left off, but this time you get to see them in the future. And that's about all that I'm going to tell you, because since it is the second book in a series, I don't want to give any spoilers, but unfortunately the story just didn't improve for me. I'm still going to stick with what I said in my last wrap-up. I do really like the movie. The movie was very interesting. Unfortunately, the book itself just is a miss for me. Then I read Music of the Night by Angela J. Ford. This was a retelling of Phantom of the Opera. This is the last time I'm probably going to mention being in the Phantom of the Opera readathon, because it did wrap up at the end of September. I read this book to get extra points for the Phantom of the Opera readathon, and because it was a thinner book, I decided to go and pick it up. I was kind of dealing with some difficulty with a reading slump, especially because of Long Live Evil and another book that I kind of had started and was struggling to get through. So I was like, you know what, let's go with a shorter read. I did also rate this one 3 stars. It was a fun time, you know, very interesting retelling of Phantom of the Opera. I did like some of the points of it and some different twists that they went and added, but there were some things that were integrated in the story towards the end that just didn't really feel right for me and just felt a little bit weird. But it was still fun to go and read, and I mean, I'm obsessed with Phantom of the Opera, so reading a retelling of it was enjoyable for me. I had an arc for Janis and the Reaper, which was by Nikki M. Griggs, and I believe this one got released around the middle of September, and unfortunately I didn't finish it by the release date. But I rated this one 3.25 stars. It had a really interesting storyline, but I felt like there was just so much going on. It was really difficult for me personally to stick to the story. So with this, you're following a girl, Janis, who basically was born because her parents formed a deal with this fae creature so that they could have a kid. They were having difficulty conceiving. And trigger warning there with this book, it does have some infertility stuff listed in the beginning of the book. And so these parents are given a changeling, which is basically Janis. And Janis is only able to live up until the age of 16 before she is basically unalived. And that is basically what the parents are given in the agreement if they choose to go through with the deal. And then we have this other character whose name completely escapes me, but he is a reaper. But he has been kind of expelled and he got into some sort of trouble, so he's now working in a morgue, and that is how he is basically thrown in with Janis's ghost. And there's just basically all these different mysteries that kind of pop up. Janis believes that she's murdered, and there's just these things with it, like the fae and the reapers and then demons. And I think from listing all of that stuff, it kind of shows how there were so many different worlds that were kind of compiled together, and it just made it a little bit difficult for me to follow along personally. It was good, it was interesting, but it did take me a little bit longer to read this book than I would have liked, and this might have also contributed to my reading slump between this book and Long Live Evil. Then we'll move on to the books that I rated 3.5 stars. So the first one was an arc that I got through NetGalley, and this one was called One House Left by Vincent Ralph. This one was pretty interesting. So basically, there's this lore about this street where any people that live there basically get unalived by this ghost. And this boy that is basically telling the story from his point of view, he has to go and move to this different school because they had originally lived in this neighborhood and got away from the sounds of it. And he basically gets attached to this group of kids that they love going and following these fairy tales. So if there was a ghost that's been haunting a certain area, and let's use Bloody Mary, for example. You know the story with Bloody Mary. You go and say the things in front of the mirror in the dark room, and then she's apparently supposed to appear. That is basically what this group of kids like doing. They want to test out if these horror stories are actually real or if they're fake. And so this boy basically gets grouped together with these kids, and they don't necessarily know his history. And so the story kind of follows there, and it was good. I was very intrigued. I was swept up in the mystery of it all, but I don't think the narrator's voice worked 100% for me because I did listen to this as an audio arc. His voice for the female characters just reminded me too much of Bob's Burgers characters, and I couldn't take them seriously. So the boy basically had a crush on the girl that was in their friend group, but every time she talked, it sounded like one of the Bob's Burger characters. So I'm like, how is he seeing this in her? Because I'm certainly not. But yeah, it was a good book. I think I would have enjoyed it more if I read it physically. And there was a surprise at the ending that just blew me away. I don't know if it was because I was so hyper-focused on the voices that the narrator was giving the characters, but it was something I did not see coming. That is why this one is rated 3.5. Then moving on to The Lake House by Sarah Beth Durst. This one I believe was on my TBR either last month or the month before, and I did start reading it, but then just wasn't really moving along with it, so I put it down and I was like, okay, sure, I'll try to finish it for the month of September. And with this one, it's basically this group of girls. They're on this boat ride to go to this camp that their parents are all forcing them to join, saying that they're gonna have this great experience, make great friendships, yada, yada, yada. And so they get there and they suddenly see that basically the campsite has been burnt down, and then end up going and finding a dead body. But there's also no way for them to get off this island. So they're kind of stuck trying to go and survive, but also trying to figure out, how do we get back home? How do we get in contact with someone? And then it turns out that there's actually some more ominous things in place that they weren't aware of in the beginning. And it kind of unfurls from there. I was originally a little bit annoyed with the main character. I felt found her to be very annoying, very pessimistic, but she actually grew on me more in the story, and that's also from the help of the other two characters in the book. I felt like I really enjoyed the friendship and the bond that they created, especially because they were trying to go and survive in the wilderness, and each one of them had a set of skills that they might not have felt really proud of or felt like people took for granted, but in this situation actually became one of their strengths. So I really did enjoy some of those aspects to this book. And yeah, I was very pleasantly surprised with how much I enjoyed this book once I got past those initial pieces in the beginning that I struggled with. So this one was a 3.5 for me. And then moving on to the next one is Butcher and Blackbird by Brynne Weaver. I actually listened to this one through Audible, and I rated this one 4 stars. Now, this isn't typically one of those books that you'd picture me reading.
Hi, Kiko. Do you want to say hi? Kiko, say hi. Say hey. Oh, say hey. Oh, hey. Oh, hey. Oh.
And he's purring right now. Bubbuts, put your butts down. Lay down. So with this one, it's not necessarily one of those books that you'd see me reading. You know, I don't tend to read books that have a lot of romance, a lot of open door types of things, but I was very intrigued by this book, especially because it has serial killers, and it's a serial killer love story. And when I was going and listening to a lot of people talk about this book, I heard some people go and say, listen to this book over audiobook. And some of them were going and saying it almost seemed like a musical. The voices of the characters were so amazing. And I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to listen to this one through audiobook and see what everyone is talking about. And truthfully, I don't know if this book would have made me feel the same feelings if I would have read it physically. I feel like I might have been less inclined to enjoy it given some of the topics in it, just the sexual pieces, I guess you could say. But, sorry, Keiko. But because I went and listened to it through Audible, I actually had a really great time. I really enjoyed the voices of the characters. I had a fun time. I don't know necessarily if I'm going to continue listening or reading the series, but if you are interested in picking this one up and you're a little bit on the fence, I would say listen to it through audiobook because the voice actors did an amazing job with reading their parts. It felt like I was almost listening to a play instead of reading a book, if that makes sense. Then I read Belladonna by Adalyn Grace. This one I did go and film a video of where I basically went and checked out a book that has a lot of hype, is very viral, to see how I felt about it and if I thought the hype was worth it. And with this book, it was really interesting. I do believe that fall, or like the weather changing and it starts getting cooler out, is the perfect time to go and pick up this book if you are considering reading it. But with this one, basically the main character, she is orphaned and she has been left behind with a lot of money. But unfortunately, since she was orphaned at a very young age, she does not get in touch with her inheritance until she reaches the age of 18. So she's basically given from guardian to guardian, and things just continue not being the best for her. Each guardian ends up going and dying, and she's given to the next guardian after that. And throughout all this time, she is followed by death, and she's able to see death every time one of her guardians passes away. So she kind of gains this dislike of death, blaming him for everything awful that has happened to her in her life so far. When she's brought to Thorn Grove, she is really determined for things to last, at least until she can finally get a hold of her inheritance. But things are a little bit weird. Her uncle is throwing parties. Her aunt apparently died, but this was before she even got there. And then her younger cousin, is sick, and then her older cousin is basically obsessed with the appearance of the family. So there's all these mysteries that are there. It kind of gave me Secret Garden vibes, except add more gothic tones and of course making it older. There were some minor spice scenes in the book as well towards the end, but yeah, I thought it was a good book. It was a 4.25 read for me. I didn't necessarily think it was a 5-star like a lot of other people have said it is, but I did enjoy it and I did think it was a good book. If you want to hear more of my thoughts, I do have my video that you can go and check out, and I will be doing more videos in that series to read books that are really overly hyped to see if it's worth it or not. All right, and then last book that I have to talk about is The Solstice Court by Jade, Juniper, and this one was a 4.5 stars. Unfortunately, I do not have a physical book with me to hold up. This was an ARC that I had, and I ended up going and purchasing a physical copy because I enjoyed the story so much, but Amazon is having issues, and so I don't have my copy yet, and I'm very frustrated about it. I might try to see if I can go out this weekend and see if I can get a physical copy and then cancel my pre-order. But yeah, this book I really did enjoy. So with this book, I really enjoyed it. It basically had to do with 3 kingdoms, and 2 kingdoms are at war. The middle kingdom is basically Switzerland, where they're trying not to show partiality to either side, and they basically create this treaty where as long as their daughter doesn't go and show any partial feelings to either son in either kingdom, then they will stay out of the war and none of their kingdom will be harmed or put into this war that they really would like to not be a part of. And so we kind of get to go and follow these children as they grow up. Kezira is the sole heir in the kingdom that is currently trying not to get on to either kingdom's bad side, and we get to go and follow basically her as she's growing up. She's getting an understanding of the world around her, and then there's this magic system, all these different things. I thought this story was so unique and I had a really great time going and reading it. Jade Juniper also has her own YouTube channel, so I will go and link her information in the description down below. But yeah, I love this story. I thought it was so different and I had a lot of fun reading it. Also around the 70% mark of the book, things really picked up. So it was a little bit slower up until that point, but not slow enough that I lost interest, and I was having fun following along with the story. But around the 70% mark, things really picked up, and then there was this surprise at the ending of the book that I just was not expecting and just overwhelmed me. And I need the next book to come out ASAP because I need to know what happens next. I need to know where things go from there. So it does have a huge cliffhanger at the end. So just emotionally preparing you for that. But if you don't want to order the book, it is also available on Kindle Unlimited, and Jade Juniper has also went and said that it will be available for the Stuff Your Kindle Day that is available in October. So hopefully I can put together a video to kind of give you tips and tricks for how to do Stuff Your Kindle Day, and also some of the books that are available, just because sometimes it can be a lot and it can be a little bit overwhelming, especially if you don't have time to put away towards really looking through all the books that are available. So I'll make sure to go and show you that, but there are a few different options to go and get this book available and making it more accessible to yourself if you're not able to go and buy a physical copy of the book. But yeah, so that is my September wrap up. It didn't exactly go the way I thought it would. None of the books were a 5-star for me, but I still did have a lot of really great books that I very much enjoyed reading. I'm hoping that I'll get more books read throughout the month of October. I'm kind of in a bit of a reading slump, especially after some of the books that I read during this month of September, so hoping to get out of that and find a few books that make me excited to read again. I feel so bad saying that, and I'm so sorry if I was too negative or anything like that during my wrap up with some of these books. Like I said, there were some frustrating moments that were just so difficult to get past. And you know when you get really excited over a book and it's such a huge disappointment, sometimes it's just hard to move past that. But anyway, that's the end of this. I will not be doing a TBR for the month of October. I kind of already did that with my fall TBR or fall recommendations and the books I'd like to read, picking throughout this time to go and read, as well as some of the books that I mentioned in the horror bingo that I'm also doing. But that is a year-long bingo, so I have a little bit more wiggle room for when I decide to pick up some of those books. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, if you made it this far, maybe leave a stack of books or something that screams Halloween in the comments, and just let me know that you made it here. And yeah, I think I'm gonna wrap it up here because Charles should be getting home and we are going to be taking a walk with our dog Nugget, especially to see all the lovely fall leaves here in Colorado. But anyway, I love you all, and always remember that you are worthy and capable of amazing things. See you all soon.